everybody. This is TJR.
And this is Robert Kinsler.
And it's time for another episode of our top 100 songs of all time. This is our stream of conscious list that we've created just based on our own personal preferences. Mm-hmm. And now, which of us shall have the honor of starting today?
And let's add quickly that this is songs numbers 31 through 35.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
31 through 35 is
where I can actually count some occasionally.
I can't. And who will start?
Why don't you start this time?
I will start. Okay, very
And then I'll follow.
All right, that sounds like a plan. So here we go. Starting with number 31, Skyscraper by David Lee Roth off the album Skyscraper. Usually when I mention this song, people are like, huh? What? I've never heard this song before. It was off his second solo album, which was the second and unfortunately last album he had with Steve Vai on guitar, Greg Bissonette on drums, and Billy Sheehan on bass. And they were an amazing trio behind him. And they did two really great albums. The first one, Eat 'Em and Smile. The second one, Skyscraper. Skyscraper is best described as a piece of progressive rock, is how I would say it, but compacted into an economical 3.5-minute song. But within that 3.5 minutes or so, it goes through so many amazing, crazy changes. It is so untypical of what you think of when you think of David Lee Roth. Mm-hmm. Yet it all works with his voice, the band playing it. It mixes elements of hard rock with jazz, fusion. It's just a really amazingly crazy, incredibly well-structured song. And I think a lot of it has to do with the band that he has there. That amazing band he had for those first two albums. Sadly, that band did not stay together. I think the David Lee Roth band would have had a lot more longevity if he had managed to somehow keep that band together. And the song has one of my most quotable, most favorite lines of lyric in a song ever, which is, God only knows, and he ain't talking.
Good line.
Yeah, and I don't imagine you've ever heard this.
No, I've never heard the song. That's why I'm just listening. Yeah, I don't know. I'll have to check it out. Yeah.
Everybody I've ever played
because I do like
it
prog
for,
rock, so I need to check that one out.
Everyone I've ever played it for, they're blown away by it.
Really? Okay.
You know?
Well, I will make sure I listen to that.
It's not like a long song. Mm-hmm. You know, it's not like this big epic musical journey. It's like I said, maybe 3.5, maybe 4 minutes long. Sorry, I didn't check it beforehand. But yeah, this song just reaches into the stratosphere and takes you on an amazing ride. And then before you know it's over and you want to write it again.
Wow, great. Wow.
So that is my number 31.
31, wow.
Let's hear yours, sir.
Now, mine, and it's about time I brought this group to my list, and that is the Rolling Stones, who have yet to appear on my list. Obviously one of the great all-time rock and roll bands. And my favorite song by the band is Wild Horses. Just love that song. I mean, that's a very well-known song. I don't think it's a surprise among Stones fans, but it's off their 1971 album, Sticky Fingers. And, you know, I know Rolling Stone once had put it at, I think they had a list, and they put it at like 334. I wonder if time has been very kind to the song, and not only because of burgeoning Americana movement, but I think the song sounds perhaps better and stronger today than it did even back in the early 70s. It's just a great song. And, you know, so despite, you know, obviously the Stones being a British band, I think this is one of the greatest kind of pieces of roots rock or Americana that's ever been recorded, and I just love that song.
It's a great song. I'm surprised I didn't think of it sooner. I'm embarrassed I didn't think of it sooner. It is one of my favorite Rolling Stones songs, too, among many. And it's funny that you should mention the Rolling Stones because they are going to be on my list today, too.
Oh, great.
As well. But not...
And we should tell everyone, we don't actually discuss our list ahead of time. We just come to the shoot, we pull out our scraps of paper, and then we move forward.
Exactly, yeah. So we have our notes, and then we just do it. And so it's a total surprise as we each reveal ours.
Now, what is your 32 that you brought today?
My 32 is All Alone by Mad Season from the album Above. Above is the only album by the supergroup Mad Season which featured Mike McCready from Pearl Jam, Lane Staley from Alice in Chains. They only ever made this one album, which is a shame. And All Alone is the song that closes the album. It is one of the most trance-inducing songs I've ever heard. And I remember I mentioned the song by the Beatles, "Tomorrow Never Knows," which, as I recall, was my number 9 pick. "Tomorrow Never Knows." To me, this is the most trance-inducing song I've ever heard since "Tomorrow Never Knows" by the Beatles. And whereas "Tomorrow Never Knows" has you exploring the depths of the universe, "All Alone" puts you in this very quiet space, you know, and is all about the type of communication that happens when only two people who are very intimate are together and share a very private space together with no one else.
Okay.
And it is just a very powerful mystical song. And it is my number 32.
Wow. And again, that's a song I have not heard, and I need to obviously hear that song. It sounds really amazing. My pick number 32 is by John Mellencamp, who has yet to appear on my list. And this is the song where I kind of went from like not really caring or being kind of a casual listener to John Cougar Mellencamp or whatever. But when I heard "Rain on the Scarecrow," I was hooked. I mean, this kind of maybe ties in with Wild Horses. It's very much of an Americana song, but a rocker. And you know what's so powerful about the song? Obviously, it has just a great guitar hook and all that stuff, and his vocals are great. But what the song says and kind of about the transition and about the loss of a way of life and just a real powerful song. And I think it's kind of like saying what I did about Wild Horses. It's as relevant today and as powerful today as I think it was back in the mid '80s when it was released. It actually, I think that song outdistances. There was a string of hits on that John Mellencamp album, Scarecrow. Like I know one was ROCK in the USA and another one's Small Town. But I think "Rain on the Scarecrow" is actually held up and is a lot more powerful compared to those other songs, today. But I love that song.
And I know that song, of course. It was all over radio, and it is a great song.
Yeah.
It is a really great song. I haven't thought about it for a while. Very powerful song, dealing with the loss of the American dream for a lot of people.
For a lot of people, especially as it relates to small farmers and everything. So and I know that that's been actually a passion of his subsequently for many years. And Neil Young and Willie Nelson trying to
help show support
with Farm Aid and everything. So but so obviously the song is very important to him. But I think it stood the test of time very well.
Great.
Yeah.
So my number 33 brings the Rolling Stones now into the list, and that is "Paint It Black" by the Rolling Stones, which I believe was released in the UK as a single, but was released on the American version of Aftermath as far as any album release. When I think about this song, I don't think I can find a better song that described the teenage angst I felt when I was a teenager back then. I don't think any song really helped me identify and relate to that teenage angst like this song did. This song, when I was a teenager and I was very angry all the time and sometimes very depressed. I was either angry or depressed a lot of times. That song really spoke to me and gave me a place where I could channel those feelings in a way that was therapeutic for me. And that song, I think, really provided a strong sense of therapy because it allowed me to express that feeling. And I would do that, of course, I would just sit alone in my room lip syncing to that song, like I was performing it in front of 100 people, 1 million people or whatever, I would sit there and do like a lot of teenagers do, but won't admit now that we're adults, that we sat there and lip synced our songs like we were performing them,
Yeah.
And that was tremendous therapy for me. So "Paint It Black" is my number 33.
And another great song by the Stones.
Yeah.
And they've had many. So
amongst many.
Yeah. Now, my track number 33 is kind of timely because 2019 marks the 50th anniversary of Woodstock. And this is a song pulled from the film Woodstock and obviously the official soundtrack. And that's 10 years after version of "I'm Going Home."
Oh, okay.
And Alvin Lee is someone I have talked about on the show a few times. But I have to say, Woodstock, obviously, I went to see that at an art house, a reissue when the movie showed. And I don't remember a lot about the movie. I mean, I remember Hendrix. But what I remember is I didn't know anything about 10 Years After and Alvin Lee. I just didn't. When that performance just blew me away. I remember signing up for guitar lessons the next week. Not that I was ever able to play like Alvin Lee, but I mean, I was so inspired. And, usually I'm a guy where it's really about the song and stuff. And this is a great song. But he has the ability, I think, with his guitar playing, where it's flashy and stuff, but he incorporates it in the structure of the song and kind of making it compelling and propelling things forward. And I think he's not got enough credit for that. I know people say, oh yeah, he's a guitar hero. They call him Speedy Fingers and all that stuff. But I think they don't really see how he blended, like jazz and blues and rock and some other styles together. And I think, but it's such an amazing performance. I think it spans like 10 or 11 minutes. But if you haven't seen the original version of Woodstock, check it out and make sure you don't miss I'm Going Home from 10 Years After.
It's been a long time since I've seen that film.
Yeah.
We should, you and I should revisit that film.
Yeah.
And watch it again and maybe do a discussion about it.
We should. Yeah. Especially being the 50 years,
Yeah.
I mean, hard to believe that was August of '69, and here we are in 2019. It's,
Amazing.
But, yeah. Okay. So anyway, what do you have for 34?
For my 34 is a song that I think you know, and I believe everybody out there is going to know. Surrender by Cheap Trick. And for a brief moment when that song first hit my brain, I was like, oh, isn't that too obvious of a pick for Cheap Trick? And I was like, no, you're thinking. Stop thinking. Go with your gut. Remember, Conscious Stream of Flow.
Right.
Surrender by Cheap Trick. And the amazing thing about that song is, besides how catchy it is, is that if I had to describe, if I had to use, if say a space alien came to me and said, what song would you say best describes the band Cheap Trick? It would have to be Surrender.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think any song describes their whole Beatles meets metal aesthetic.
Yeah.
Which I think has been like just a constant in, like, I would say the majority of all their music they've recorded is there's that strong Beatles meets metal aesthetic to them.
Exactly, yeah.
And I don't think any song describes it better, when you listen to it, than Surrender.
Yeah.
And
let's be honest, it's just a great song. It comes on the radio or you put it on. You just have to crank it up. It's just a very exhilarating musical ride.
And when I was that teenager who needed who used a song like Painted Black for therapy, Surrender was a song that was also therapy because it was aggressive, but it made me feel happy.
Yeah.
It just made me feel happy. And the weird, sardonic, almost humorous lyrics, very humorous lyrics actually. Yeah, the whole, the little kid saw mom and dad rock and roll and got my Kiss records out.
Yeah. It's great.
Very, very wonderfully fun.
Very
lyrics.
cool song.
So that is my number 34.
Yeah. 10 Years After has been a band that I think very big in the late 60s, early 70s, but over time they're not as well known. And that definitely applies to The Call. The Call had some big hits. I think they even had a #1 record in their I want to say in the late 80s or maybe 1990. But now I think you talk to a lot of people that are just coming of age and discovering rock and roll. They have no idea who The Call is. There was a song they did in the late 80s called Everywhere I Go. It was off their best-selling album. I think it was called Reconciled. And that is just a great song. It's just driving. Michael Bean, who's the bassist and singer, there's just such an impassioned vocal performance. And I was lucky enough to see The Call once. A very underrated band, one of the best bands in the 80s. But unfortunately, when you hear like 80s flashback, no one ever plays The Call, even though they had some radio airplay and just a really original band that didn't sound like anyone else, And I just love Everywhere I Go. And that just and across that album, I can't say necessarily on this song, but just to show you who the kind of people that were their fans on that album. You had Peter Gabriel, you had Simple Minds' Jim Kerr, and also Robbie Robertson from the band. So they had a period where they seemed like big things were going to happen for them, and for whatever reason, as we both know in the strange world of rock and roll. Yeah, some bands just kind of disappear, and it's unfortunate. So I know we have some really passionate music lovers out there, and if they haven't heard of The Call, definitely check out Reconciled and that song Everywhere I Go, because that's my pick number 34.
That song.
Yeah, great song.
Yeah.
Just really driving and propulsive. Love that
and
song.
And very dark and mysterious too, in my opinion. Yeah, I enjoyed that song a lot. So it's time for my number 35. And my number 35 is a song entitled Love Me by The Phantom. Sometimes it is credited as just simply by Phantom versus The Phantom.
Mm-hmm.
And The Phantom was a country singer named Jerry Lott who switched to rock and roll after he heard Elvis Presley. And he would perform wearing a Lone Ranger type mask
Oh, really?
on his face.
Okay.
Which, if you think about it, during the 50s, when Elvis performed, that was considered, in many respects scandalous, the way he performed. Just the way he shook and the way he danced, it was considered scandalous. And I think that just if you were like wearing a mask on stage, that would be to me like the equivalent of the shock that maybe parents might have felt when they saw Alice Cooper with his makeup or Kiss with their makeup. That kind of like, oh, what's that? If you have to dress like that, you're probably not very good. That type of thing. I can imagine that. But Phantom, unfortunately, never became all that big. And Love Me is what I call a really great lost classic from the 1950s. This song is not even 2 minutes.
Wow.
It's under 2 minutes long.
Wow.
It's somewhere between 1.5 minutes and 2 minutes. It opens with this blood-curdling scream from the lead singer, and then there's this very raucous rockabilly guitar riff, and then this bass comes in, and it is just a crazy minute and 45, 50 seconds, I'm not sure, that just expresses to me, just the rage and inferno that is teenage hormones. When you're a teenager and your hormones are just going out of control, that's what this song describes. And the song doesn't even properly end, and it works. It just kind of like it's almost as if the band didn't even know how to end the song. And you hear you hear like a sort of an ending, and then another cymbal hit, and then boom, and it's just like okay. But it works so amazingly well. It is so aggressive. It is so raw. It's almost punk. This song, it's almost punk in many respects. This song is way ahead of its time.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. I go just from what you're saying.
Too wild, in my opinion, for the time it was recorded. Much too wild.
Yeah.
I understand the song was recorded in one take, and it sounds like it.
Wow.
And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just, they hit the record button, and they captured just a fury of emotion. And what it lacks in technical finesse, it way more than makes up for in just the sheer crazy chaotic fury that is the song.
Wow.
And so love it.
I need to
Love Me.
I need to hear a few of the songs
by
that you've
Phantom.
brought to your list today. And last but not least for me, and kind of like our theme about people that are artists that maybe deserve a little bit more attention in 2019, they're kind of is the Smithereens and Only a Memory. This is a song that, at least in Southern California, you used to hear it on 91X and K-Rock and KLOS. I don't think I've heard it on the radio in 10 or 15 years now.
Yeah.
I mean, and it is a great song. The lead singer, Pat Denizio, unfortunately died a couple of years ago. So I recently went to a tour where Marshall Crenshaw was filling in for him, and it was the other three original members, and they did Only a Memory, and it's like, wow, boy, did that kick in my memory. It's like, what a fantastic song. And it's kind of like what you're saying about Cheap Trick. The Smithereens kind of they fused the Beatles' melodic songcraft with just kind of AC/DC riff rock, and kind of like what Cheap Trick did. And they did that in a unique and masterful way that no one else has done before or since. And just a great song. And what I would say is with all the first 3 or 4 Smithereens albums, definitely the first 3, especially for you, Green Thoughts, which features Only a Memory, and then also 11. These are some amazing albums, and I would encourage people to check those out. If you haven't heard of the Smithereens, many people will have heard about them and remember them. But yeah, and if you haven't listened to them for a while, put them on, and you'll be surprised how great they still sound.
I remember their hits on the radio. I remember that hit. And you're right, radio has they were like all over radio for a while, and then for whatever reason, some bands keep getting repeat airplay, some don't.
We need to do a show on that. I mean, because there is something And I don't know, and I don't blame music fans per se. It's
Yeah.
like the programmers have this thing. They have some analytics or something they use. They go, we're gonna play these 3 Bad Company songs. We're gonna play these 4 Led Zeppelin songs.
Yeah.
These 3 Aerosmith songs. I mean, and
nothing
it's
else.
ridiculous. And at least it like branch out a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, even and it's no wonder a lot of these classic rock radio stations are going away. I mean, people get bored.
Why I stopped listening ages ago
Yeah.
to terrestrial radio,
Yeah.
and why I can't stand to listen to a classic rock radio station, even though there is a huge amount of classic rock on my iTunes. You know?
Like you mentioned, Tomorrow Never Knows. Other than like on a Beatles specific program, you're not going to hear that on classic
No.
rock radio. And
You're not gonna hear it.
And I mean, it's a Beatles. It's great.
Yes, it's one of the most innovative songs they ever did.
Yeah, and it's
And
sad.
light
Or a
years ahead
song
of its
like
time.
Rain, or a lot of I Am the Walrus, which is on both of our lists. I know we
Yeah.
both talked about that. Is obviously a song that still gets played, but the Beatles had many other masterpieces that deserve that kind of attention as well. Yeah. So good list.
Yes,
TJ.
same to you.
Yeah.
Good list. And everybody, that was our 31 through 35. And as always, please tell us your 31 through 35. There have been a lot of people out there who, every single episode, they've given us their next 5. And I enjoy reading every single one of them. I can't always comment on every one, but I know Robert has too. We love reading your list too.
There's some great lists out
Oh
there.
yeah,
I've been
and it's just
loving
like,
them. Yeah.
and then there are songs that I'm like, oh wow, why didn't I think of that one? That's such a good
And
song.
what,
It's a
what
good
I've
song.
really been, last thing maybe I'll say about it is I like the diversity, kind of like our list. Like someone will have Elvis Costello and then something totally different than Elvis. And that's kind of where we're at too. We like so many different kinds of artists.
And I love seeing the diversity in the list that I'm looking at out there too. But whether you're just, I know some people are more inclined to maybe a genre but have some outside taste, and some of us just go insane with the diversity as far as the type of music we listen to. Either way, whatever, if it's your list, if it's meaningful for you, then I enjoy reading that list.
Yeah, exactly.
And so everybody, thank you so much for watching, and we'll be back with our next 5 as we make our way through our top 100. We're working our way towards 50 now. Getting to the halfway point here.
Exactly.
Getting to halftime. And as always, if you like what we do, please click like, click subscribe, smash that notifications button. And also, if you want to help even further, follow the Patreon link, which will probably be floating at some point high overhead, and help us make more videos by becoming a patron supporter. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.